Hi everybody, this video is a public information video and also an address to Matt Hancock, the British Medical Licensing Authority and Britain's professional healthcare workers, GPs, nurses, whoever. It's my second attempt at making this video because I'm afraid my first attempt degraded into a torrent of abuse against Matt Hancock, which was very good for me to let out some of that emotion, but you know, it's not what really people need to hear. But unfortunately it is how a lot of people are feeling right now, and especially people who are informed beyond the constraints of the thoroughly corrupt and complicit UK mainstream media, which includes papers like The Guardian and the BBC. So, Matt Hancock. Everything that I'm about to explain here is supported by a host of scientific papers, medical journals, trusted news publications like, for example, Forbes. Nothing I am sharing here could be deemed as a conspiracy theory or of the kind of news that comes from QAnon. Okay, I am talking about mainstream science, mainstream news reports. I'm not going to share all of those details here. I've shared them before in my previous videos. I ask members of the public and yourself, Matt Hancock, to have a look through those, and all Britain's medical professionals to examine everything that is shared in the description box below this video. Get informed. Everybody has a duty to be informed. Now, here is Matt Hancock this week informing the British public that we are the first country that's going to be receiving this clinically approved coronavirus vaccine. Okay? Reportedly, it's the one by Pfizer, and it is a bio-nanotech vaccine. So we're talking about bio-nanotechnology that seeks to genetically modify our immune system DNA. That is what this vaccine is. You have failed to explain that, Matt Hancock. As Health Minister, you have failed to explain that the vaccine is a bio-nanotechnology vaccine designed to genetically modify our immune systems. You have failed to explain that it is an unlicensed experimental bio-nanotechnology gene editing vaccine. It is unlicensed. You have failed to explain or even ask why it is unlicensed. And the fact is that the British Medical Authority would be liable for any damages that this vaccine inflicts because they had granted a medical licence to a vaccine that is still in its experimental stages. And the whole point of granting licences for medical products, medical treatments and vaccines is to ensure that those products and vaccines have been through all the stringent testing and have met all the criteria required for any medical product to be rolled out for mass public use. So it appears that British medical authorities are not prepared to take the risk of liability and grant a licence to Pfizer, Moderna, AstraZeneca, any one of their vaccines. But they have approved its use on the strength of what? They've approved its use on the strength that we're in the middle of a pandemic. It's a medical emergency and therefore, oh my gosh, we'll try anything because it's so terrible and it's so bad. So, first of all, we know for a fact, after a year of dealing with this COVID-19 business, we know that our hospitals have not been inundated with patients. We know that lockdowns have actually killed far more people than COVID-19. Okay? This is the fact. This is the Office of National Statistics. Okay? This isn't QAnon. This isn't fake news or a conspiracy theory. This dotted line here represents, between that yellow line and the dotted line, represents COVID deaths during lockdown. Alleged COVID deaths. And we'll get into that in a moment. All the rest are deaths through the lockdown. People denied healthcare. People trapped in their homes. Domestic violence. Suicides. You name it. All of those died during lockdown. Lockdown appeared, all these people died. There was a slight bump. There was an actual slight increase in COVID deaths because this is COVID, maybe, in brackets. And now we'll get into why it is maybe, Matt Hancock. Because the PCR tests are known to be 97%, up to 97% false positives. Okay? Up to 97%. Why? This is the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention in America. This is the equivalent to Britain's Imperial College. What do your results mean? A positive test result shows you might have antibodies from an infection with the virus that causes COVID-19. However, there is a chance a positive result means you have antibodies from an infection with a virus from the same family of viruses called coronaviruses, such as the one that causes the common cold. So, the vast majority of people who are being told that they have COVID-19 very likely have a common cold, because what are they more likely to have? A brand new virus that's only just appeared, or the common cold, which is called the common cold. Why? Because people commonly catch a common cold. People are commonly fighting off a common cold at any given time and are therefore asymptomatic. There is absolutely no evidence whatsoever to prove that people who are asymptomatic, showing no symptoms whatsoever of a coronavirus, but nonetheless have tested positive for it on one of these PCR tests, there is no evidence to prove that that person is transmitting the coronavirus they have tested positive for carrying. None whatsoever. Okay? And yet people are being put on quarantine. People with no symptoms are being put on quarantine. The whole country under lockdown because, you know, anybody could be carrying it. People, asymptomatic people, are being told to wear masks when it even says on the medical mask box, will not provide any protection against COVID-19, coronavirus or other virus or contaminants. You know, that is not fake news. This box was not created by QAnon. This is a medical box. A medical mask box. So we're talking, and again, all the links are there. Check it out, people. I'm talking about absolute solid scientific studies here. We're not talking about fake news or misinformation. We're talking about actual scientific medical facts that the PCR tests do not and cannot tell anybody they have COVID-19. At most, they can tell you you have a coronavirus, or you had a coronavirus, or you're fighting off a coronavirus. And you know, let's not forget the people who, like for example, I have witnessed people who've received the swab through the post, they've taken it out of its packet, not touched it, put it straight in the vial to send back for testing, and it's come back positive. The person's that told you, oh, you've got to quarantine for 2 weeks. The president of Tanzania, he tested paw through other things, all came back positive. He kicked the World Health Organization out of his country. They were trying to force him to impose lockdowns and mandatory masking and blah, blah, blah. To destroy his nation's economy, basically. He kicked them out. But, of course, we don't need to believe the president of Tanzania, do we? You know. Why? Because he's a black African president? We can just dismiss him? Apparently, according to Matt Hancock and the whole of British Parliament, yes. We don't need to learn anything at all from Sweden, whose the impacts of COVID-19, alleged COVID-19, on the people of Sweden have been absolutely no different to the impacts in Britain, where actually the impacts of lockdown have been far, far worse. I'm very sorry to hear, Matt Hancock, that you lost a family member, your, was it step-grandfather, allegedly to COVID-19. And I have to say allegedly, because there is no test on this earth, and that's the fact of it, that can definitively tell anybody that they have specifically COVID-19 that has developed into SARS or pneumonia, that they don't have MERS, that they don't have another strain of SARS, that they don't have another strain of flu. My auntie died of flu-related illness at the age of 52. She got pneumonia, she died. There was no national out-mourning for it. Nobody ever in Parliament has stood there on the verge of tears explaining to the nation as health secretary or health minister, explaining that, oh, I'm so upset I've lost a family member to flu, and at the same time trying to promote experimental, unlicensed vaccines. So this is from the BBC in 2015, and the source again is the Office of National Statistics. Winter deaths, excess winter deaths related directly to flu-related illnesses, pneumonia, largely, SARS type, severe acute respiratory syndromes. Near 50,000 in 95 to 96. That must be about 97, 98, 40 odd thousand, near 50,000 in the year 2000. Then we dropped for a few years, and then suddenly in 2014 to 15, 43,000. And then again in 2017, 2018, another near 50,000 people died. No lockdowns, the NHS survived, nobody was denied healthcare, nobody's lost their business or their jobs, people weren't being harassed and assaulted on the street and by police because, you know, they're not wearing a mask. The whole country was not brought to a standstill, and people were not being threatened with mandatory experimental, unlicensed bio-nanotechnology vaccines to genetically modify our DNA, our immune systems. You see, I am for informed consent, and that is why I believe that you are a criminal, Matt Hancock. I accuse you of deception, fraud, and conspiracy to rob and harm the British people on the strength of fraudulent data, cherry-picked experts, and ignorance of actual medical scientific facts and journals and studies, and the associated risks with an experimental vaccine. Because, as I say, in the description box, I am not going to you know, complicate this video by going through this study, that study. Oh, look at this, people. I've done it how many times? How many people have done it? Last American Vagabond himself has been sharing so much information. UK Column News, the same. People like myself have been sharing the same, doing research, sharing information with other news providers that have a far greater reach than myself. All the links of information are in the description box under this video. So, I would like you to explain to me, Matt Hancock, as Health Secretary, how on earth any vaccine manufacturer in the space of 10 months with a new bio-nanotechnology CRISPR-based vaccine has been able to do any test whatsoever on anybody when there is no test that can say this person or that person definitely has COVID-19. Are we being vaccinated here against the common cold, or are we being vaccinated against COVID-19? No, the tests, all the tests can tell is that people have a coronavirus. So the vaccines can basically only deal with a coronavirus. And actually, the vaccines, as has been explained in the very limited information that's been put through about these vaccines, is that, oh no, they won't cure people of COVID-19. What it will do is minimise symptoms. Well, since 80% at least of the people who are test positive for COVID-19 are asymptomatic, that means they show no symptoms whatsoever, with a further 10% actually showing minimal symptoms. And even people, and I know this for a fact because this is a member of my circle of friends who is in a nursing home and has COPD. They allegedly contracted COVID-19 during the summer of this year and recovered from it. Why aren't we hearing about the cases of people who actually have severe underlying health conditions but who are nonetheless recovering from what they have been told is COVID-19, according to the dodgy PCR test? She probably had a bad cold. She probably had another strain of flu. But apparently nobody in this country this year has had flu. Nobody's had any regular flu. Nobody's had a bad cold or a mild cold. Everybody has had COVID-19. We are talking about fraud, and we're talking about a vaccine produced on the strength of the fraud of the PCR tests, which again, I will leave the information. Those tests are being abused because they're supposed to be run at 20 cycles, and here in Britain they're being run at 37 and 40 cycles, and therefore are picking up anything and everything and claiming it's COVID-19, when actually what is happening is that people at best can be told they have evidence of a coronavirus within their body, and so are therefore being assumed to have COVID-19 and forced into house arrest. It is absolutely outrageous. Now, when it comes to the medical professionals of Britain, all of you people, again, who are keeping your mouth shut now, you're all complicit. You're complicit with a criminal conspiracy based on fraud in order to basically rob and harm the British people in the interest of earning profits for Big Pharma, giving the government control, absolute full control, scrapping human rights and scrapping our healthcare. While Matt Hancock is stood there, lip trembling, talking about his elderly family member who died of COVID-19, I can stand here and explain about the friends and family that me and my friends have lost this year. Not a single one to COVID, but have died through suicide and heart failure and other illnesses because they were in lockdown and weren't able to get treatment, who lay dead in their homes for days. The people who are suffering severe depression and are getting ill through the depression. The thousands upon thousands more people who have suffered directly through the draconian policies implemented and enforced by people like Matt Hancock. And he's talking about this as a day to remember, in a year to forget. Well, no, we are not going to forget this year, Matt Hancock. Many people will be recovering from the impacts of this year for the rest of their lives. The people who've lost their livelihoods, the people who are facing homelessness, the people who have cancer that is now untreatable, is now terminal because they couldn't get the prompt medical health care that would have prevented that cancer from becoming terminal. This isn't a year to forget for those people. And how dare you, The Guardian, how dare you, the BBC, how dare all you ignorant, evil, criminal MPs sat in Parliament ignore those people and ignore the facts that I am sharing as a simple member of the British public, and you telling me, you GPs and doctors and nurses out there, that you do not know what I am saying here. Now, in my previous video, Informed Consent, and I'll leave a link to it underneath this, I was extremely upset when I made it, but I managed to hold it together. And yes, you know, I did fluff my wording a bit in it, but nonetheless, I shared it. But Matt Hancock, he needs to know. People, you need to stand up to these people. You know, one of the things that they're claiming is that with this new normal, you know, it's going to be good for the planet, it's going to be good for the climate, and blah, blah, blah. Depopulation is a necessary thing. We've heard Bill Gates say this. This isn't a conspiracy theory, this isn't from QAnon. Bill Gates has stated in public, in no uncertain terms, that, you know, with improved healthcare and vaccines, we can bring the world population down. Now, the BBC, Matt Hancock, nobody, not one single British MP has got up and stood up and asked Bill Gates, who happened to be at number 10, sat with Boris Johnson earlier this week. Bill Gates, a computer software salesman, okay, is there discussing the nation's health and a vaccine, a man who has stated that with a vaccine you can bring the world population down. And nobody's asked him, well, how is that possible? Unless the vaccine's going to kill people. How is it possible to bring the world population down with a vaccine? Can you please explain that, Bill Gates? And then next minute, he's sat in our Prime Minister's home, number 10, discussing the rollout of an experimental, unlicensed, mass gene edit, bio-nanotechnology vaccine that has been developed on strength of PCR tests that are 97% false positive. I say to you people that this planet needs every pair of human hands it can get to clean up the corporate filth created by the people that men like Matt Hancock represent, who are destroying our planet. They have destroyed our planet against our will, against our wishes, and they have oppressed us and robbed us to do it. They have denied us true democracy. Our media are a corporately controlled propaganda mouthpiece who do not inform the public. And so they're a disinformed, misinformed, uninformed public have not been able to respond in a timely manner to the problems that our planet now faces. For every tree that has been chopped down, there stands a human being who can plant many more trees. What this world needs isn't carbon taxing and vaccines. What our planet needs is human hands empowered to repair the damage. We need hemp industry. We need an end to drug prohibition. We need to protect our children. We need to shut down every single nuclear power plant and find a cleaner, safer way of using nuclear power, of using nuclear energy, of which there are many, but it just so happens that you can't make nuclear bombs out of the material. Because a nuclear reactor is needed to make a nuclear weapon. Without nuclear reactors, there would be no nuclear weapons, people. Do you understand that? That they have been producing material for nuclear weapons on the pretext of providing us with enough energy to boil a kettle. There are many, many avenues and technologies open to us that have been suppressed by these corporations that would give us free, cheap, clean energy. But the corporations have conspired to oppress them because it cuts into their profits. And Bill Gates is going to profit from these vaccines. He has invested in every single one of them, Moderna, AstraZeneca and Pfizer. He is going to make not just billions, but trillions. Oh, and he's got no liability. But you see, the British Medical Authority would have liability if they granted a licence to this vaccine, because it is experimental. And so they would be liable for any damages that people suffered. And I am very concerned, and you, the British public, need to be very concerned. And why aren't you concerned, Matt Hancock, about people with already severely impaired immune disorders and illnesses receiving a bio-nanotech gene edit? I'm talking about people with things like lupus, who were on medications such as COX inhibitors, which actually shut the immune system down. And the British Medical Authority just says, yeah, roll out this experimental vaccine. I want to know what you, British Medical Authority, have seen by way of information to assure the public who have autoimmune problems that actually this vaccine is not going to cause them even more damage, even worse damage, and actually put them at a far greater risk than anything that COVID-19 could throw at them. And bearing in mind that even people with underlying health issues who have caught COVID-19 have actually recovered from it, without needing to be put on a ventilator or receive oxygen. Because I know for a fact that GPs are sending out letters to all their patients inviting them to come in for these vaccines, even people with lupus who are on COX inhibitors. Or how this vaccine might affect people with fibromyalgia. Or how it might affect people with severe allergy syndrome. Or how it might affect people who are already suffering from genetic disorders. There just has not been enough time, and yet there are no warnings. We're talking about people being treated literally like cattle, and with the threat of mandatory vaccinations looming over our heads should the public uptake not be high enough. And we're a nation heading towards a hard Brexit that is actually criminal. And it is criminal. The people who voted Brexit, the people who voted against Brexit, it don't make no difference, right? We're leaving the EU. We have a right to a deal. Just as any couple divorcing, both parties have equal rights to a share of the house, a share of the wealth of that marriage. What each has put into it, each has a right to take something out from that marriage. Okay? And the same with Britain. We've paid in for how many years now? And you're telling me that we'll just be leaving with nothing. The divorce that leaves one spouse just out in the street with nothing. No food, no home, nothing. No rights. No, you're going to get a deal because your hard Brexit is criminal. But you see, Matt Hancock and Boris Johnson, they want a hard Brexit because then they'll be able to impose martial law. And during martial law, human rights are suspended. And we're talking about a military that is empowered with the Kill Bill, where, you know, all manner of government agencies have a right to hire covert agents to kidnap, torture, rape and kill anybody that they feel is a threat, either to their economic interests or to national security. So, you know, people asking questions about vaccines, well, we could be an economic threat or maybe we're a national security threat, because apparently COVID-19 is a matter of national security. So we're talking about men with guns. We're being threatened with men with guns on our streets because our government has decided to put us through a criminal hard Brexit where we leave the EU with literally nothing. After all the years that we've been paying in, that we don't even get a trade deal. That then gives you the right, Matt Hancock, as you repeatedly stated, and I will leave you the links, people, repeatedly, this man has stated, yes, martial law is on the statute books in event of a no-deal Brexit. Understand what martial law is. I will leave you the links. Check it out, people, get informed. And with no human rights, and they decide that everybody's going to have this vaccine, that we're going to have military coming, dragging us out of our homes to force us to have a bio-nanotech gene edit of our immune system. These are the facts that we are looking at, people. The facts that the BBC is not telling us, that The Guardian isn't telling us, that Matt Hancock isn't telling us. Why? This is a global conspiracy then. What else, what other conclusion can we arrive at? And like I say, I am not anti-vax. I'm not particularly pro-vax. I am pro-informed consent. And I am sharing information, and the information is here. And you, Matt Hancock, Boris Johnson, every member of the British Medical Health Authority, the licensing authority that has approved this vaccine to be rolled out en masse with no exemptions, no any special criteria to be included in it. Every single one of you belong on trial. The conspiracy and criminal negligence. Criminal negligence and conspiracy to commit harm against British citizens. That's the fact of it. The BBC, The Guardian, the lot of you, all of you belong on trial. The criminal negligence in failing to inform the public on very serious matters of public interest that could have far-reaching effects to such a degree that our genetic gene pool could be damaged indefinitely to every future generation. And that is a serious worry. A serious concern, so much so that Time magazine in 2017 published an article covering just that concern. Again, it's in the links in the description box under this video. I suggest you read it, Matt Hancock. And why haven't you read it? Why haven't you, as Health Secretary, checked all the information? Why is it down to people like me to be sharing the information? Why, when The Guardian is there, being paid how much money every year? The BBC, how much is he on a year? How much are the medical authorities on a year? Why is it down to people like me to have to sit down in front of our screens at home to go through all the medical science and inform the British public? Now, if you want to take this video down YouTube, shame on you, and I will actually sue you. I will bring a class action against YouTube for prohibiting solid facts and information during a time of national global emergency, where our planet is in crisis, where humanity now is facing a crisis of corporate oppression and denial of our human rights. That people like my grandparents sacrificed so much to ensure for future generations. That people might have been denied healthcare in Britain. That we have been fed lie after lie after lie after lie. This is a medical max box. This is not a creation of QAnon. Will not provide any protection against COVID-19, coronavirus or other virus or contaminants. Fact. That an asymptomatic person, that there is absolutely no evidence to prove conclusively or anywhere near conclusively that anybody who's asymptomatic is actually spreading a virus, a coronavirus. Absolutely none. People sneezing, people coughing. Possibly if their cough isn't related to, an allergy, or their sneeze isn't related to an allergy, because allergies are non-infectious. The vast majority of people who cough and sneeze cover their mouth with something. But, alright, in a year of pandemic when possibly there's a new strain of deadly virus out there that, as it turns out a year later, is nothing like as deadly. We were being told a 1%, 2% death rate. It's been, I think at most a 0.6% death rate among people over the age of 70 with underlying health issues. That people who have tested positive with the dodgy PCR test and then died through falling off a ladder have then been added to the COVID-19 list, death list, because they died within 28 days of being tested. Yeah, but they died because they fell off the ladder. Yeah, but they tested positive for COVID-19. That's fraud. This is fraud. This is fraud. Fraud, 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 fraud. You are a fraudster, Matt Hancock. And as Health Secretary, you belong on trial on charges of fraud, criminal negligence and conspiracy. And Boris Johnson with you, and every single British MP that has failed to stand up and speak out, every single one of you belong on trial. Now, I say to you, Matt Hancock, you go ahead and bring your martial law in. Okay? Put this country through a hard Brexit. Start trying to force us to have your experimental gene edit. Okay? And yes, Parliament will be surrounded by the military, and the military shall turn around and point their guns at you, at the people like you that are in it. And the police shall turn around and they will arrest you. And all of you people who want to destroy Britain and turn it into a corporate tax haven farm where everybody's job, livelihood, health is at risk. And that includes the police and military that you are now relying on to protect you till, you know, when you've destroyed us lot, well, they'll be next, won't they? Who are you going to replace them with? The 3 million people that Boris Johnson's going to invite here from Hong Kong? Yes, 3 million. What, 3 million police officers? 3 million security agents? 3 million financiers? From Hong Kong into Britain, into a country that men like you and Boris Johnson persuaded to vote Brexit because to stop immigration. And here you are with 3 million from Hong Kong invited into Britain to work. You can't even provide homes for the people that are here. The British people in their millions, 3 million people right now in Britain are facing homelessness through lockdowns, loss of business, loss of jobs. And you want to invite 3 million people to live here. You're offering £135 a day to volunteers from the general public to start administering experimental bio-nanotech gene editing vaccines. Suddenly you've got cash in your pockets to pay people 135 quid a day. You've stolen 100 billion off our NHS. 100 billion. 2/3 of the NHS budget. Told cancer patients they can wait 7 years for treatment. For what? To spend on those PCR tests that are 90%, at least 90% false positive, that cannot tell people they have COVID-19, that can only tell people that they have traces of a coronavirus. 100 billion. And the people aren't out en masse. Why? Because they're being lied to by The Guardian. Because they're being strung along by the BBC. Because they're being bombarded with propaganda and disinformation. Because people like me are being shut up and having our YouTube videos taken down. And branded conspiracy theorists and right-wing fanatics. I voted Corbyn. Everything that's been happening is absolutely deeply, deeply, deeply disturbing people. And this is a crisis. It's a crisis of human rights. And it's a crisis, basically we're facing crime and criminals. And so, I'm going to have to leave it there. Arrest Matt Hancock. I asked Britain's security services, get up and do your jobs. Do it now, please.